The camel is much more useful to the Arab, for he is much larger and stronger. One camel can carry as much as or more than 2 horses. The Arab load the camel with goods and ride them too, for miles and miles across the desert, just as if he were really the ship of the desert, which he is often called. Question 1. Where and how do most of the Arabs live? Second, what do they live on? Third, how do they treat their horses? Fourth, what is the ship of the desert and why is it so called? Ninth, Dionysius, king of Syracuse, had a courtier named Damocles, who always flattered him, saying, "How grand it must be to be a great king like you, sir." One day Dionysius said to him, "You shall be king for one night as a reward for your loyalty." Damocles was overjoyed, and that night he sat on the king's seat at the head of the table, dressed in the royal robes. But as the feast began, he chanced to look up and saw over his head a heavy sword hanging by a single thread. The dreadful sight spoiled his dinner and all his pleasure and pride. He was very glad when the feast was over and he could leave the royal seat. Next day Dionysius asked him how he had enjoyed himself. "Not at all," cried Damocles. "All the time I was in terror of the dreadful sword falling on my head." "Now," said Dionysius, smiling, "you know what it feels like to be a king." Questions. Who were Dionysius and Damocles? Second, why did Damocles make Damocles a king for one night? Third, how did Damocles feel at the table? Fourth, what was the king's comment? 10th, India is the home of 4 of the principal religions of the world: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism and Sikhism. The Parsis who came from Persia or modern Iran made her their home long ago. She has also been the home of many Muslims and Christians for hundreds of years. India is thus the common mother of people of all the different faiths in the world. The Vedas, Vedanta, Gita and Ramayana and Mahabharata are regarded as the treasures of mankind. The world got its early arithmetic, algebra and geometry from India. It was Indian scholar that gave the number 1 to 100 and the zero sign, page 690. You may have heard of the universities at Nalanda and Takshila. The former was in modern Bihar and the latter was near modern Peshawar. They were the most famous seats of learning in their times. Even scholars from different countries came and lived there as students for years together. In works of art, India has some very wonderful things. The cave temples at Ajanta and Ellora, the temples at Puri, Konark and Madura, and the Taj Mahal at Agra draw thousands of people from all parts of the world every year. Questions. A. How can you prove that India is the common mother of people of all the different faiths in the world? B. What has the world got from India in science and literature? C. What do you know of the 2 most famous seats of learning in ancient India? D. Name some of the wonderful works of art in India. 11. There is an old Persian story that an aged man, lame and leaning on a staff, appeared one stormy evening at the door of Abraham's tent. He was received with the usual hospitality, but observing that the stranger ate and prayed not, asking no blessing on the food, Abraham asked him why he did not worship the God of heaven. The old man said that fire was his god and he worshipped no other. On which Ibrahim was angry and drove him out into the night. As soon as he was gone, God called to Ibrahim and asked where the stranger was. He replied, I drove him out because he did not worship thee. But God answered him and said, I have suffered him these 100 years. Couldst thou not put up with him one night? Upon this, Ibrahim brought him back and entertained him hospitably. Questions. How was the old man received by Ibrahim? B. Why did Ibrahim turn him out? C. How was Ibrahim rebuked by God? D. What was the result of this rebuke? 12th. The Gypsies are a tribe of strange people. They do not have any fixed home, but wander about from place to place and live in tents. They were originally natives of India, but as they reached England from Egypt, the English took them for Egyptians. This is why they came to be called Gypsies. They were believed to possess strange powers. They could tell your fortune by reading the palm of your hand. It was thought that they stole little children to train them in their way of life. Hence, parents took care that their children might not go near them. Whenever a child got lost, it was thought that it had been carried away by gypsies, so they were arrested and sent for trial. But this feeling against them had gradually died down. Questions. A. Who were the gypsies? B. Why are they called so? C. How do they live? D. What are ordinary people's idea about them? 13th. You have read in your books that the world is 3/4 water and 1/4 land, but this was not the case in the beginning of creation. The earth was then full of water only. There was no land, no tree, no bird, no animal, no man. Life began to appear after many thousands of years had passed away. First, it came in the form of fish. Gradually, islands of mud and soft earth crept up. With them came creatures that could live both in land and in mud. As the land surface increased, new forms of life took shape. Some of them were huge and ugly creatures, much bigger than the elephant. Time went on for more years than we can count. Some of the old creatures disappeared completely. Why they did so, we cannot say. We, however, know of their existence from the bones they left behind. Learned men have put these bones together, and we may see them in museums. Question. What was the condition of the earth in the beginning of creation? B. What were the early forms of life? C. How do we know of the existence of creatures that are no more? 14th. Malaria is caused by a germ that grows in the patient's blood. When a mosquito bites a man who has malaria, it sucks up into its stomach some of the man's blood. There are malaria germs in his blood, and when the mosquito bites another man, it injects into his body some of these malaria germs, and this soon results in an attack of fever. But not all mosquitoes carry malaria. The malaria mosquito can be distinguished by the appearance of its body and by its position when standing on something. To prevent the spread of malaria, all that is necessary to do is to destroy the mosquitoes. The most effective way is to prevent their birth. Mosquitoes do not grow in flowing water, so ponds and ditches should be properly drained. It is also useful to spread kerosene oil in the surface of the water. The use of DDT in rooms have proved to be very useful. Questions. How can you know a malaria mosquito? Second, how does it spread malaria? Third, how can malaria be prevented? Page 691. 15th. In the American War of Independence, a corporal and a party of soldiers were sent to raise a heavy beam for a battery that was being repaired. There were too few men for the work, but the corporal, full of his dignity, did nothing but stood by and shouted orders. Presently, an officer not in uniform rode up. "Hallo," he said to the corporal, "why don't you lend your man a hand to get that beam up?" "Don't you know that I am a corporal?" was the reply. "Are you?" said the officer, who then got down from his horse and joined the men. He worked till the sweat streamed down his face. When the beam had been put up to its place, he made a low bow to the corporal. "Good day, Mr. Corporal. Next time when you have too few men for this kind of work, send for the commander-in-chief, and I shall be happy to help you again." It was Washington himself. Question. First, when did the incident stated here took place? Second, what were the corporal and his men required to do? Third, what did the corporal do himself? Fourth, what did the officer ask the corporal? Fifth, what was the corporal's reply? Sixth, what did the officer do? Seventh, what did he say after the work was done? Eighth, who was he? 16th, Einstein was very simple in his ways of life and indifferent to his astounding fame. Once, the Queen of Belgium invited him to Brussels. When he got down from the train at Brussels, he could not think that there were actually many gorgeously dressed officials to receive him at the station. The officials also expected to see somebody who would appear to be rich and aristocratic to them. They never imagined that this shabby man would be Einstein himself. So they went back to the Queen and informed her that he had not come by the train. Einstein, however, walked the whole way with a suitcase in one hand and a violin in the other. When he reached the destination, the Queen said to him, "I sent a car for you, Dr. Einstein." "I did not think," replied the great scientist with a smile, "that anybody would send a car for me, but I can assure you I have greatly enjoyed the walk." Question. What was unexpected to Einstein at the Brussels railway station? Second, what did the officials expect to see at the railway station? Third, describe the dress of Einstein as he came down from the train. What did he carry in his hands? Fourth, describe in 2 sentences Einstein's attitude towards life and fame. Fifth, what did the officers report to the Queen? 17th, multi-storied buildings have their own distinctive culture. Nowhere is this more apparent than in the use of their modern automatic lifts. Things go smoothly enough most of the time, but not during peak hours when everyone is dashing off to school or work, or returning from home in the case of adults and from playing in the case of children. Both occasions more or less coincide. This is unreasonable to expect queues in residential buildings, but most people honor the dictum of first come first in. There are of course the exceptions who, on seeing the crowd already waiting for the lift, plonk themselves right at the head of it, knowing fully well that politeness will overcome the desire to protest. Or there is the type who, regardless of the number of people waiting, will purposefully stride up and continuously press the bell, as though none of the others had the wits or the fingers to have done so. Then there are those who refuse to make the distinction between the 2 separate push buttons for down and up, pressing according to their whim, usually both, which means that there is an additional halt, maddening when the rest of the passengers are in a hurry. Equally maddening are children who press the buttons on every floor so that the lift stops on all 8 or 10 or 12 landings, with no takers at most of them. But these are kids. What about the adults who stand pressing the hold or door open button for agonizingly long minutes, while his wife or son or servant arrives, obviously of anyone else? Question 1. What happens when someone keeps pressing the up and down buttons indiscriminately? Second, what do the children do in the lift? Third, what do the adults do? Fourth, why is it unreasonable to expect queue in buildings? Fifth, why doesn't anyone protest when someone plonks himself at the head of the crowd? 18th. It is possible to find some good in most creatures, some way in which they are of real use to the world and mankind. But it seems impossible to find any good at all in the locust. It is a destroyer. It is in shape like a grasshopper and will sometimes grow to the length of 5 inches. It has a head very much like that of a horse, and when it is full grown, has a pair of strong wings with which it can fly for hundreds of miles without stopping. Unfortunately, when a locust fly, it does not fly alone or in pairs or even in hundreds and thousands. You can hardly believe how huge some of these locust swarms are. Page 692. Often they will take hours to pass overhead, and some swarms also so great that they cover an area of many square miles. No wonder that people on the earth below watch the flight of such swarms with anxiety, for wherever they alight, crops and vineyards are doomed. They immediately begin to devour the leaves of the trees, the grain growing in the fields, and the green blades of grass, until in an unbelievably short space of time the country has been laid a barren desert. Question. What is the difference between locusts and most other creatures? B. Describe the appearance of a locust. C. Give an idea of the hugeness of locust swarms. D. Why are people so much afraid of them? 19th. Before I, Subhash Chandra, was 16, I had my first experience of what may be glorified with the name of village reconstruction work. We went to a village outside the town with the object of attempting some service. We entered the village primary school and did some teaching, but the teachers and the villagers in general were very warmly welcomed, and we felt greatly encouraged. We then proceeded to another village, but met with a sad experience there. When we entered the village, the villagers who had seen us from a distance collected in a body, and as well advanced, they began to retreat. It was difficult to get at them or to talk to them as friends. We were shocked to find that we were regarded not only as strangers but as suspicious characters or enemies. It did not take us long to understand that whenever well-dressed men had come into the village, they must have done so as tax collectors or in some similar capacity, and had behaved in such a manner as to create this gulf between the villagers and ourselves. Questions. What was Subhash Chandra's first experience of village reconstruction work? B. What was his second experience? C. What was the second experience due to? 20th. Each nation has its own symbol. It means a picture of something which the government of a country uses on its official papers. It is a mark which represents the country. You know that our national symbol has been taken from the lion capital of King Ashoka's pillar found at Sarnath. The UN has its own symbol too. There was a custom in Europe in very early times that when one of the two parties to a battle wanted peace, it would send to the other the branch of the olive tree. The olive branch therefore came to be the sign of peace, and because peace is the first care of the United Nations, its symbol shows two olive branches placed round a map of the world, which means that it wants to keep the whole world in peace. This symbol also appears in white on a light blue ground in the flag of the UN. It is the sign of the united effort of nations to bring peace and happiness to mankind. Questions. What is a national symbol? B. Where from has been taken the national symbol of India? C. What is the symbol of the United Nations? D. What is the meaning of this symbol? 21st. The land of Spain. In a village of La Mancha, there lived long ago a gentleman named Alonso Quixada. He was very tall, thin and bony, with a long bare face. Reading was what he loved most, but he liked to read only books of a certain kind. These were stories of the knights and heroes of olden times, of their brave deeds and wonderful adventures. At last his brain became quite crazed upon this matter, and he made up his mind to become a knight like the knights of old. Like them, he thought he would ride out with lance, sword and armor to fight all wrongs and to help the weak and all who were in trouble. The first thing he did was to find an old rusty suit of armor, a lance or spear, a sword and a shield. He cleaned the armor as well as he could. He had a good and hard-working beast, but as bony and thin as his master. Yet Quixanda thought him the most splendid horse that a knight ever rode, and he gave him the fine-sounding name of Rosinante. Next he thought of a name for himself, and at last he made up his mind that he would from that time be called Don Quixote de la Mancha. Question. What was the real name of Don Quixote? Describe his appearance. B. What kind of books did he like best to read? C. What did he decide to do? D. How did he prepare himself? E. What was Rosante? 22nd. It is gratifying to learn that a commission has been set up by the central government to consider the introduction of moral education in schools and colleges. As our country is a secular state, there is no question of preaching any particular religion, but lives of saints, patriots, and all great religious teachers and thinkers of the world may be taught. Moral lessons may be given to every child, irrespective of religion. Page 693. Faith in God, courtesy, humbleness, love, and respect for all mankind are virtues which can be cultivated only through proper moral education. But it is not right or proper to leave this important problem to be solved by the government alone. The responsibility lies mainly on parents and teachers who are concerned with the education and upbringing of youths. It is the duty of the mothers and women folk to impress on the minds of the younger generation the value of morals and building up a strong character? Questions. A. What does moral education mean? B. How is it to be given to our youths? C. What is the role of women in the matter? 23rd. Once upon a time, a great Khalifa of Baghdad had a slave. He was very ugly to look at, short, hunchback, and black as sin. And yet the Khalifa loved him very much and had him constantly around. One day his courtier asked the Khalifa, "O Lord, how is it that you love this slave more than all others? He is a dwarf, has a crooked back, and is hideous like night." The Khalifa answered, "Listen then to the story why I love him so much. Once, as I was going through the streets of Basra, a camel of my train slipped and fell in a street. From the camel's back there fell an ivory casket containing my most precious pearls. The lid of the casket was broken, and the pearls rolled away on the muddy street. I called to my slaves and said, 'Lo, here are pearls with price. Go and have them. Every one will get what he picks.' And all the slaves went away and began scrambling for the pearls, all except this ugly one. And I asked him, 'My God, my good fellow, why don't you go and join your friends?' The man replied, 'My king, thou art the most precious of pearls. I stay to guard thee.' The emirs said with one voice, 'O Lord, truly thou dost well.' Questions. A. Describe the appearance of the slave. B. What happened as the Khalifa was once going through the streets of Basra? C. What did the Khalifa tell his slaves? D. What did the other slaves do? E. Why did not the favorite slave do like them? 24th. All people say that childhood is the best part of life. They look back at their childhood and cakes they used to eat, the jokes they used to play, and endless discussions they had among friends about almost every topic. Perhaps these old folk are right, and yet they forgot many things that were not so pleasant in their childhood. There is a funny story that tells of a boy who was crying because he had to go back to school after the holidays, and the father scolded him and said, "Why, I only wish I could be a boy and go to school again." And all in a moment the father was a little boy, and his son was a grown man like his father. And the father, in the shape of a little boy, had to go to school, and I can tell you he did not like it at all. A child's troubles may seem small to grown-ups, but they are very big to them. Questions. What are the joys of childhood? B. Do you think old people would be happy if they became children again? C. Why was the boy crying? D. What did the father say? E. What was the result?